All right, welcome back to Booze Come in Pairs, first episode of the new year, and we are greeted with a fellow podcaster, much more successful than we currently are, but Kyle Stanley at The Setup Man, also does not live in Illinois. So yeah, Kyle, how and why are we doing a Cubs podcast?
Well, first of all, success depends on how you define success. I don't think that we have to play the comparison game, but I am excited to be on with you guys. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I mean, you say, how did I become a Cubs fan? Is that or the podcast?
Both. Let's start with the Cubs fan.
That's start out with your Cubs fandom, because you are, from what we understand, you are not from the Chicagoland area. No. But like a lot of Cubs fans who are not from the Chicagoland area, there was a very wonderful broadcasting network that is near and dear to our hearts as well, that kind of looped you in from the West Coast. So yeah, how did you become a Cubs fan?
Yeah, WGN and Sammy Sosa, simple as that. Growing up, I was a baseball card collector, and Sosa, McGuire, Griffey were my favorite cards. And then I found I could watch Sammy Sosa on Sundays. Really only watched WGN and the Cubs for Sosa. And then, how do you not become a diehard Cubs fan with all the tradition, with, Chip Carey being a total homer? Like, it's just, you just kind of, it for me, like, I don't know anyone else in my position that wouldn't have become just a raging Cubs fan given all those factors. And it's funny because, like, I'm not really a huge sports fan outside of the Cubs. Like, I would even say, like, watching a 9-inning MLB baseball game sometimes is tough for me. But when it's the Cubs, it's like, do not talk to me. I don't want to hear anything from anything on the outside. Sometimes my wife doesn't like that, but that's just the way it is, right? And then the podcast, to give you the long story short, I was a sports anchor right out of college, and I didn't like the fact that, like, I had to do things a certain way. I definitely didn't like covering high school sports for a local TV station. I can tell you that. Not a whole lot of passion behind that. But when I got to a point in my real estate career, as I was kind of telling you guys before we started recording, I was like, all right, now that I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and I have a little bit of time freedom, the idea is, what do I want to do with my time? And the Cubs have been a passion for my entire life, and that's pretty much where I decided to go with it. Just start pressing record and seeing what comes out of my mouth.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of why we started, because again, you hear all this. And when you had your interview with Jesse Rogers, I feel like he kind of doesn't appreciate this level of media, but this is kind of the new media. This is where players want to talk. But also the people that have the microphone don't, like, that's not always the best opinion of my, like, anybody can talk sports, right? It's really just your fandom knowledge and whatever. So it kind of just gives you a voice to whatever you want to speak to. So
yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of people with a mic. There's very few people that actually do the research and care about the end product. You guys, like, I know, definitely care about your end product. There's a lot of people out there that don't, and those are the ones that, I don't think that we're even talking about them, because most of the time there's not much of a viewership. So and that goes along with, like, the reason I was able to have a guy like Jesse on the show was because, like, I'm a huge Cubs fan, and it's really tough to, like, not get emotional about everything Cubs related. But if you want to have the Boogs and the Justin Steeles and the Jesse Rogers on your show, you got to come out with a little bit of, like, let's do some research and let's actually figure out what the core subject is that we're talking about from a realistic head on your shoulder standpoint, which is really difficult as a fan, to be completely honest.
Yeah, and it's really hard to not get emotional too. And I mean, that's the thing. It's a team that we care about. It's a team that we love. It's a team we want to see succeed and do the things that they're capable of doing. So, I mean, it's been cool, really cool to see how your podcast has grown. I mean, I started following you around the same time that we started last year. Started following your Instagram and YouTube channels, and it's been fun to watch the videos and listen to the interviews. I really like the little tidbits, though, when you're kind of breaking down a play, or breaking down a series of pitches, or just kind of, hey, like, I'm going to throw out my idea about signing this younger player to an extension. You had a video about PCA the other day, where it kind of offering him like a Jackson Churio type extension at a younger age. So it's cool to see, man, for sure. It's cool to see where everything has gone for you. I mean, you're closing in on 5,000 followers or subscriptions very fast. You're over the 1 million view mark, which is so impressive. And the cool thing is that we can tell that you care. Like that's great. And you have a passion for this. It's great to see people just really exploring that areas of passion in their life. And especially when it's baseball, like we're big fans of that. So very cool.
Well, shoot, guys, I don't even know if I want you to ask me any questions. Like, you just piqued my ego. Like, I might as well leave now.
Right.
No, we want
but thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, down to brass tacks. I feel like, again, I've been watching some of your content and kind of fueling off of that. We're also in the, what are we going to do next year? You know, we're getting in this at least for me, because again, football season, I know you're probably not a Bears fan. Good for you. But it's been baseball season.
I get a break.
Yes.
It's been baseball season for me for about 12 weeks already. But, you know, as we look forward to the next season, and also what we've kind of seen the last 2 years, the front office is kind of telling us they want to win. We read Tom Ricketts' letter to the fans after last season about how disappointing it was. The moves they're making are kind of confusing, though. You traded for Justin Tucker, but you get rid of Bellinger, right? So you're still kind of
Kyle Tucker.
Sorry,
Kyle Tucker.
Yeah. See,
get the football out of there.
Football, right? But so we're making these moves, but they all kind of seem centered around, we're not going to spend like the Dodgers, we're not going to spend like the Mets, and I get that. I get they're a business. Again, if you go back and listen to your podcast with Boog and Jesse, they break that down, and you feel smarter talking to these guys. But from the fan perspective, it's hard to take what they're saying and then what the front office is telling us of we're trying to compete and actually believe that.
Right.
So for you, where are you at on that belief scale?
I think Jed has to make the playoffs, to be honest. Like I went back and forth. I've had a few conversations with guys within the organization, and now I lean more towards like Jed's on the hot seat.
Really?
For a while there, I was kind of like, well, and again, I have people within the organization I hear things from, and I know that like Tom and Theo by the end just weren't seeing eye to eye on a lot of stuff. And so, you know, my brain goes to, and this is all speculation, my brain goes to like, well, maybe that means that Jed is more of Tom's puppet, and for that reason, like he'll do whatever Tom tells him. He'll stay under the threshold unless he does bad math like he did this last year. And he'll do all the things that Tom wants. Meanwhile, Tom knows that, hey, as long as we have a serviceable team, we're going to be raking in the money. Well, now, you know, after talking to Jesse, after talking to some people within the organization, I lean more towards the fact that, A, this team, if you don't include all of the other things that Tom Ricketts owns, from the real estate and the, you know, the restaurants, the bars, all the things out within Wrigleyville, if you just focus on, you know, what's in Wrigley Field and the operations and the money that comes in there, based on my talk with Jesse, it doesn't make as much money as we all might think. Now, the casual fan, including myself, says, well, then put a freaking good product on the field and see what happens. You know, Shohei Ohtani goes to the Dodgers. I live 3 hours from LA. 2023, I could go and sit down the right field line, 10 seats or 10 rows from the field, see Seiya Suzuki drop a ball in right field, right? Like it was perfect. It was the perfect seat. And it would only cost me $80. Then they go get Shohei, and that same seat cost me minimum $220. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a team that invests. And guess what? You know, they win a World Series and people show up. So yes, that is true. I just wonder, especially talking to Jesse, I just wonder if Tom and the front office are running this so much like a business and trying to, you know, mitigate risk so much that they've lost sight on the reason that they bought the team to begin with. I don't know Tom personally. I don't know enough people that know him really well, but you know, the outside perspective is I just wonder if that was a checkbox, right? Get the World Series. Okay, now we can run this like a business and we're not as emotionally tied. I don't know. But that's where I just see these like calculated moves, like you said, of getting Kyle Tucker and then you get rid of Bellinger. And then you have these trade talks. There's still time left before the offseason is over, but there's $50 million to spend and they don't seem to be in a hurry to spend it. They seem to be really motivated to make some trades, but unless it's maybe, I don't know, another 10 million towards a couple bench bats and maybe 5 or 6 to a bullpen guy, maybe pushing 10 for a bullpen guy. I think that's kind of all you're looking at. And then the starting pitcher feels like it's going to come via trade. I know we've been talking about Jack Flaherty being a possibility. I don't see it happening, nor do I think that that's the way that I don't think that's the best option anyway. I'd rather see a Pablo Lopez type of trade. But even that, you look at that and you're like, well, you still have to take on $21 million a year from Pablo Lopez.
Right.
So I don't know, man. Like, it's a good question, Brandon. If you asked me this 2 weeks ago, I'd have been like, they have a lot left to do and they are motivated to do it. And then after the Luzardo trade kind of fizzled out, it was like, there was that 10-day span of like, whoa, who is this team? Kyle Tucker, Carson Kelly, all these things were going on, all the rumors, and you were like, this is fun. And then it just kind of stopped. So one thing I will say, and I know I've made this a really long answer, I apologize, but one thing I will say is the most random moves from Jed have come when the organization and the media are the quietest, right? We didn't see the Morel trade coming. We didn't see the Bush trade coming. There was a little bit of talk about Shota, but even when it happened, you were like, oh, that guy picked Chicago. Oh, he's been living here for a month and he didn't tell anyone, like, all of those things. It was surprising me that the Kyle Tucker thing went down because of just how loud it was. I was just thinking, I was ready to just be disappointed with that. So either way, I can say this team is better than last year.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. To add to that a little bit, and I don't like, it kind of feels like Jed might have a muzzle on him a little bit, or like a leash, like, hey, this is how far that you're able to go. And I don't know if this is just a Tom Ricketts thing or if it's just a Chicago sports organization thing. But the thing is, like,
don't do that.
I'll keep it short. But I mean, the Bears, the Bulls, the Blackhawks, all of these teams have, like, they sell out. They sell out no matter how the team's doing, especially the Bulls and Bears. And the owners have no real motivation to hire top tier coaching. Craig is an exception. Joe Madden was an exception, but like when it comes to the Bulls and Bears, like, they're not hiring the experienced coach who's the killer, who's going to bring in the good organizational guys. I feel like with the team, though, it's like, it doesn't matter who we put on the field. These fans are going to show up. How many other ballparks are you going to be able to go to at like 1:30 in the afternoon and it's sold out? People love Wrigleyville. They love being in the park. It's a great atmosphere. We've been there so many times in our lifetime. So I don't know. It's tough because fans do expect a winner. They do want a winner, but they show up regardless.
And I think it's really, I will say something that fans probably won't like, but I encourage fans to think about, I don't know, 12 years ago, like, just coming off of a little bit of a run there, right? It was 2007, 2008. I think they were decent in like 9 or 10 as well.
Correct.
But like, that decade that had just passed was the first time in a very long time that you saw multiple playoff appearances. Yeah. And you could kind of feel like, okay, the expectations are changing, but like, we weren't as fans being like, why aren't they spending more money? We were just kind of like, hey, here's the product, and we just hope that it does well. I think there was 1 year, it was, 2004 when they got Derek Lee and they went out and got Greg Maddux, and you were like, wow, like, they're really working to make this a good team. But outside of that, like, even the 2015 to 2017 run was all done internally. Yep. Right. Outside of John Lester and Jason Hayward. A few pieces like Ben Zobrist were picked up, but we weren't like, we weren't like, go spend money. That's been recent. So I think it's important for us as fans to also like remember, hey, the floor is basically higher, is what I'm trying to say, which is good. I think it should be. I think as fans, we should want a higher floor and a higher ceiling. The problem to me is the floor is higher, but the ceiling isn't higher. And that's where as fans, we start to get frustrated, is like, okay, we were 7th highest in payroll. I believe that was the number this last year, just barely behind the Braves. And had the Braves not had every guy on their team get injured like crazy, they were a much better team than the Cubs. And that's just the frustration, is like, if you're going to go spend the money at the level they did last year, be better than an 83 win team, but also like, why aren't we spending more? I do have the answer based on what Jesse told me, but I also am just like what we said earlier. Why not spend more money if you can see a comp in the Dodgers where they spend more money, they charge more money, so they're going to make more money.
Yeah,
right.
And the TV network, I think, has a lot to do with that. And
a ton.
I don't know enough about the finances of Marquee and why the Dodgers have been better. I'm not privy to that, but I know they say that. But for us, on this level, it's an excuse, right? And you can omit all the buildings around Wrigleyville. You know what? Every rooftop that's not blocked by a video board is a Ricketts rooftop, right? The hotel, the restaurants. If you go to Wrigleyville 10, 12 years ago, it doesn't look the same. It's completely different. Right. So he's totally built it up, and it's hard to neglect those things as a fan. Going there as a fan, you're like, wow, this place is different, and you also know they own all of it. So it's a tough pill to swallow, but you're right. The expectation, and it should. You can't just win we're not the Marlins. We don't win one every 20 years and then that's okay. We'll just stink for the rest of them. We were there. Me and Ryan were in the seats because we wanted to see Junior Lake. Mm-hmm. That was like the big draw. We went and I saw Javi Baez's first homer. Like it's like, let's go see the new prospect. And he hit a laser.
Chris Bryant's first extra base hit at home. That was fun. It was cool.
I think we saw Chris Bryant's first homer in Milwaukee too. That's what we were going to see. We were going to see the prospects. We weren't seeing them because they're a good team, but the trap was also those games were sold out or close to it, or there was 35,000 fans. You go anywhere else in the country, probably other than like Yankee Stadium, Boston, probably the Dodgers, but like most of those seats on a Tuesday night are empty. And the trap is, though, in Chicago, it's such a big draw. You go to the South Side, there's 4,000 people there, but you go to Wrigley, here it is. So that's the trap. I did want to touch on what you said about Jed, and I think it'll be interesting to see what Ricketts does if the Cubs don't make the playoffs. I think Jed is doing his job. I think Jed is doing his job to what Ricketts wants him to do. Otherwise, I don't know why he'd still have a job even now. He's saving him money. He's staying within the baseball budget, and he's, to your point, he's being a good soldier. Whether he's a puppet, I don't know what it is. But if, let's say, they don't make the playoffs and Jed Hoyer somehow is still the GM, then that'll tell you all you need to know about their intentions as a team, as an organization, that maybe they do value the finances over overspending, going the luxury tax, like some of these other teams that have all these, angel investors and celebrities that own their team. That's the difference. Right. And as a fan, that sucks, right? Because we want our team to be all in. We want our team to be spending like crazy every single year. What the Mets are doing makes no sense. From no standpoints. No. So let's get that out of there. What the Padres did a couple years ago makes no sense. You're not. But
that's where they're not running those like businesses though. No, those are rich billionaires who have a hobby and say, I don't care where the money goes. I want to see these guys win, or I want to own something where I can get all the attention for making them a winner, which is fine. And kudos to those organizations for having that opportunity. But like that doesn't feel like the way that Tom runs it anymore. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that was the main difference there.
Yeah, right. And that's 100%. And so I guess we'll see where he is with that. One thing that Boog Shabby said to you that really caught my attention is that this last year with the Cubs, they won as many games as he expected them to win, which was 83. And that to get to that 90 wins, basically everyone would have to overachieve. It seems like, again, I agree they're a better team right now. Kyle Tucker is a better hitter than Cody Bellinger. Not that Cody Bellinger had to go, but I think they've improved their offense. Mm-hmm. I still think they're sitting in that range of everyone needs to overachieve to get to 90 wins. Why are we sitting here? Why do you think we're sitting? I know we've kind of touched on a lot of it, but like, is that a good way to run contending playoff team.
And when you say, why are we sitting here, like, why hasn't there been more moves made? Is that what you're saying?
Or is that an acceptable way for us to respond? Like, how should we be sitting here?
That we have to overachieve in order to get to the 90 wins that Craig has been very open about. We need to be a 90-win team to be a playoff team, especially in this division, in this league.
I don't personally understand why Jed Hoyer, who's a guy who plays everything close to the chest, saying like we have to overachieve, like admitting that I have put together a team that should not win more than 85 wins. So in order to make a 90-win team, we've got to overachieve. I'm more expecting him to be like, listen, we know this is a 90-win team. We just didn't play like it this last year. Right. Now they're big on metrics. So yeah, if you look at Fangraphs and everything, I think Fangraphs last I looked, it was, what was it, like 88 wins or something like that is what they're expecting from the Cubs right now. So, they think that Tucker deal along with Carson Kelly, who, by the way, sneaky, if you read the Bleacher Nation article about Carson Kelly, puts into perspective just how big of an upgrade that is for the Cubs.
Oh, yeah.
Along with the fact that, like, if you just have a healthy bullpen, like that was the biggest thing last year, man. Like, and I know fans are so hung up on they had 26 blown saves. You could have a blown save in the 6th inning. I don't like that stat. The only blown save that I care about is in the 9th inning. And that wasn't nearly as bad after April as we all think it was. But if you could get just like a Kirby Yates and or they're not going to go after Tanner Scott. I'm sorry to break any hearts there. It's not going to happen. If you can get a Kirby Yates, a Carlos Estevez, someone who is that 8th or 9th inning guy, and suddenly every guy before him just feels that like sigh of relief of like, okay, I don't have to be an 8th inning guy. I can be a 7th inning guy. Porter Hodge doesn't have to be the closer in year 2, not even in his first full year as a major leaguer. Going into his first full year, doesn't have to have all that pressure. If you can just work on that with just one guy, I don't think that's asking a whole lot. So to answer your question, Brandon, no, I don't think it's acceptable, but I also don't think we're that far off. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, you have, and people are vastly underestimating. I've seen a lot of comments out there online. Oh, we basically replaced a good hitter with a really, really good hitter in right field. No. Kyle Tucker has the ability to steal 30 bags. Kyle Tucker is a Gold Glove right fielder. Kyle Tucker has the hit tool, the contact tool. He is the 5-tool player. Cody Bellinger in his heyday was, but now it was, he just wasn't quite there. That was a major upgrade. Sucks. You have to get rid of Cam Smith. I still think that is a huge disadvantage of having to get rid of him, especially because it's looking like we may not be able to extend him given any sort of like poor season from Kyle Tucker.
I don't think there's any intention to do that either.
Well, again, and I hate to say it, but I think Jed's job is on the line. And when you are making desperate moves, you're going to do things. And he's not going to admit that. He's not going to, but I think that's exactly where that motivation comes from. The only problem I start to have, I'm glad the Luzardo deal didn't happen because you're trying to they wanted Casey and Triantos, and I don't know what they're asking for Pablo Lopez, but I'm guessing they're asking for big prospects as well. You start to see the farm system go from a top 5 farm system down to a middle of the pack farm system, and you get these 1-2 year control guys. That to me is a little too desperate a move. So, I think just to sum it up, Brandon, I think this team is better. I think they should win 88 games. Last year, I thought they'd win 85, but I also thought that they had the chance of winning 90. Yeah. But injuries and underperformance and a lot of those things led to the final 83-win product.
Yep.
Right. I kind of want to talk. I want to touch on the bullpen a little bit there because I fully agree that a guy like Kirby Yates brings a ton to your bullpen. This is a guy who has tons of experience. He's been the number 1 guy. He's had over 40 saves in a year. He still has a good fastball. He still has good off-speed pitches. I think bringing in a guy like him, I'm not so sure about Finnegan. Finnegan's kind of erratic. But Scott, yeah, and he's older. Scott, I believe, is also off the table because you don't really want to get into a situation where you're giving a Josh Hader type deal, which he's probably going to get, considering the year that he had. Granted, he wasn't the guy because Suarez had a ridiculous year for San Diego, but he was part of a very successful team. But I mean, you look at the other arms in the bullpen. I mean, Porter Hodge, who I watched your interview with, seems like an amazing dude, but filthy stuff. I think he's only going to continue to build on things. Tyson Miller, I expect to be pretty decent as well. And then adding guys like Eli Morgan and Thielbar. I mean, Morgan was exceptional with the Guardians, and Thielbar, prior to this weird year, had 3 to 4 very solid years. Good lefty fastball, kind of has an interesting arm slot as well. But then you think about all the young arms they have at their disposal. I mean, hopefully we can get a healthy year of Ben Brown, healthy year of Wicks. Cade Horton, maybe at some point, he's kind of got some weird injury stuff going on with his upper arm, shoulder area. So it's kind of hard to figure out what he's going to be right now. But you have some really nice young arms that if they don't have a regression year, which I don't expect them to, I feel like Wicks was kind of banged up. He kind of just had his regression year. I could see a guy like Wicks rebounding and pitching really well out of the pen, spot starting. Not sure what they're going to do with Assad, but he's a good utility pitcher. I feel like he kind of regressed a little bit, but he's got the stuff. He pitches to contact. I mean, you have some really nice young arms that if we get the right side of the coin, like they're going to have some power arms. Bring in a guy like Yates to kind of coach up these younger kids. I mean, that could be a really good, like low risk, high reward. Don't have to spend too much. And to me, if you're winning 5 to 10 more games because your bullpen is dynamite, I mean, that's the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs.
Yeah, even 5 games, you're at least like going to the last day of the season wondering if you're going to make the playoffs, which is, I think at the end of the day, that was the biggest disappointment this last year was, I think, going into September, 2 or 3 games out of the wild card. And then it was just another collapse for 1 week that just put them out.
Right.
I do personally think that Porter Hodge has to have some sort of regression. To me, I know that some things clicked, and he said that in my interview with him was just like, hey, when I was up in the majors, I just had to like raise the mental level of where I was at. And that's why he started throwing more strikes. He started living in the strike zone more. He was getting better results. But, throughout his entire minor league career, he averaged right around 5 walks per 9 innings. And then he comes up to the majors and it was closer to 3. I think there's going to be some sort of regression there, which is why I don't want to see him with that kind of weight of you got to be the closer. So you go out and get one guy. And here's the thing, like there are potentially 15 to 17 guys competing for 8 spots as it is. Right. So it's a better situation than last year. It's just, again, who's going to be healthy, who's not. And I think we're in an age of baseball now where you just have to assume that half of your bullpen, the way that it is on opening day, is not going to be the way that it is at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. And I think Drew Smiley was the only guy who was on the opening day roster and the final day roster this last year. Right. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
I was going to say, for how volatile bullpens are, you might have eight spots open. All 18 of those guys will be pitching in the major league at some point if they're worth anything, right? Because it's just, you're not going to get through a season unscathed. My biggest point is when you get to the post, well, we need to get there first, right? Let's get to the postseason first. But when you get there, I don't want, let's just use Porter Hodge as an example. I don't want his first playoff appearance to be the 9th inning of game 2 of the wild card series. Right. I want someone like, and again, Emmanuel Clase got knocked around this year. And that was that was a name that was rumored for the Cubs at the beginning of the season when we were thinking the Guardians are going to sell. But I would still take that guy on the mound over whoever that you've never heard of that he's making his first appearance. Usually, and again, Hader didn't have a great postseason either, but you pay those guys to be the guy because they've done it before.
I think going back to your conversation about Ricketts, you said if Jed still has a job after another non-playoff season, that's going to tell the story. I think even before that, the bigger story that will be told is before the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Will this team, if they are in striking distance of anything, right?
Yeah.
3 games out of the wild card, 3 games out of the division, leading a wild card spot, will they make the moves necessary? Will they, 2016, who was our closer until the trade deadline? Hector Rondon.
Hector Rondon.
My gosh, think about him in a World Series game. Good Lord. Like that's the kind of
No one
stuff
pitched
that you're
besides
like,
Chapman
okay,
all postseason. So we don't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
who's on the
Yeah.
roster.
you look at that and you say, okay, that was
Yeah.
a team that was ready to make the moves.
Yeah.
If this team by July is in striking distance and goes out and makes the trades to get the bona fide closer, let's say Josh Hader is having a phenomenal season. It wouldn't be Josh Hader because of their contract, but someone like a Josh Hader on a team that's not doing so hot, go and get that guy. Go and get that big bat. If someone is down, or if you got to get rid of Suzuki, if you got to get rid of, call it, Nico Horner to go get that big bat in the middle of the season and slot Shaw over at second base, and it's a big third baseman, call it Bo Bichette, whoever that might be. Like, those are the moves to me that will tell more of the story than currently going into the season or after this 2025 season.
That's a good,
Right.
But you got to be in contention. If you're not in contention, then we never get to test that out.
Yeah.
Right. It was kind of like a few years ago when they went and got Castellanos. I mean, Castellanos they ended up not making the playoffs, but it wasn't for lack of trying. That guy was the hottest hitter in baseball after the break.
Fun.
And it was devastating that they didn't go after him because he was a free agent after that, but ultimately ended up working out. He's kind of had a couple good seasons in Philly, a couple he's regressed a little bit. The pop's not necessarily where it was before, but those are the kind of moves you're looking for them to make, is go get that guy, go get a bat like that.
Yep. Well, if there's one thing we know about Craig Counsell, especially with the bullpen, is he's going to find out who can pitch in April, May, and June. And then if they're not cutting it, he won't go to them anymore, right? So he at least is going to give that time to kind of feel it out and see if they're contending. And then he might go look up and be like, hey, I need some help, right? That's kind of his MO. And we don't have to look far to the Brewers to see how they churn out. They've been churning out closers for like 20 years, going back to Derek Turnbow, right?
Yeah.
So, and they just got rid of Devin Williams, and I guarantee whoever they throw in that closer role next year is going to throw bullets, right?
It's probably going to be Jacob Mizorowski. They're 6'7", got like 22-year-old who throws 101 miles an hour.
Okay,
it's probably
there you
going to
go.
be him.
See, they just keep lining them up, but they're not so concerned. And again, it's tough when you see such a close example of like how to be successful with less money, but it's frustrating too because the Brewers are a small market team and the Cubs are not.
Well,
but
and here's something that I think will be interesting is, and maybe we've already seen it in play. Last year, Craig Counsell gets signed on November 1st or 2nd, whatever it was, and there's a lot of getting your feet wet. Probably a lot of overwhelming. Where am I going to move my family? Yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of personal stuff going on there. I don't know how much of a footprint he had with the front office to like go talk about what kind of moves do we want to make. Yeah. I don't think it's a coincidence that this year we've seen a lot more moves, not just because Jed's job is on the line, but Counsell is probably a lot like Dansby Swanson in the organization's ear of like, let's go get these guys. This is where we were lacking this last year. He didn't have that opportunity last year because he didn't manage the Cubs the year before, and because of all the factors that I already mentioned. So I don't know. I still think, and I think it's really important for everyone to remember, we hadn't even made a move at this point last year. Right. There was no Michael Busch. There was no Shota Imanaga. There was no one who was added to the team at this point last year. So we're light years beyond where we were last year. What's to say we don't have another 2 to 3 moves still in the holster? We just don't know about them yet.
Yeah. Right. Like you were saying before, it's the sneaky moves that no one's expecting. Things are dead. And all of a sudden it just like a ton of bricks just right on you. And you're oh my goodness.
The counterpoint to that is they are a major market team in a big city. Why do we have to make sneaky moves to be good? That's the where my brain goes is like, we don't have to be strategic.
I mean,
but yeah,
I'll tell you the answer to that, and this is why Jed is on the hot seat. It's because of the moves that he made leading up to this. Who gives Ian Happ a no trade clause? Who gives Seiya Suzuki, who's never seen a major league pitch, a no trade clause?
Right.
Who gives Dansby Swanson $25 million? Now, I'm just going to tell you. I don't dislike that contract as much as most people. I actually, and I like it.
Yeah.
Based on what was available there, I mean,
move.
Good Lord. Yeah. I mean, if we would have spent $280 million on Xander Bogaerts and have to move him over to second base and be stuck with that for years upon years, I would have been.
Or Carlos Correa.
Yeah. I mean,
Trey Turner was the other one, but they weren't going to spend that much money. So
yeah, Trey Turner is probably the only guy there that you're like, okay, maybe if they would have got him, it would have been better. But that's that kind of money. I'm just saying it's these kinds of contracts that were signed before that have put them in this conundrum. Why would you give Ian Happ a no trade clause for a contract that lasts into 2026 when you have Owen Casey and Kevin Alcantara and PCA coming up in your system, knowing full well that two of those three guys minimum is going to be ready by 2025.
Yeah, right.
Like, and again, I get it. Ian Happ was coming off of a good year, so for that reason, like, it made sense to extend him. Okay, but you already had right field with a no trade clause, which when you look back on that contract, you're like, wait, coming over from Japan and you gave the guy a no trade clause, like what? Half of those Japanese players come over and they don't know how to acclimate. So I just think it was. We've done that. I don't know. I think that's the irresponsible part. It's not the spending. It's the locking yourself in locations on the field.
So here's a little bit of pushback to the, these guys have no trade clause, right? Well, if you think you have a prospect that's going to be better than Ian Happ, at least hit better. Again, I know he's a Gold Glover. Left field probably isn't your best defensive player anyways, which is fine, whatever. Do you think Ian Happ's going to waive his no trade clause if you put him on the bench? Do you think Seiya Suzuki is going to waive his no trade clause if you say you're never playing right field again, we have Kyle Tucker? I think so. So why are we so handcuffed to think that, and I won't say we, I guess, because we're not, in the organization, but the handcuff might come away if you just tell these guys they're not going to play, right?
Yeah, the only problem there is Ian Happ was an all-star in 22. He was serviceable in 23, and he had a really nice year in 24. So does it make sense to put him on the bench if okay, let's do a hypothetical. Ian Happ goes down with I think it was a hamstring last year that put him out for 2 or 3 weeks. Owen Casey comes up lighting the world on fire, right? Let's just say 3 weeks he hits 5 bombs, OPS over 1,000, and you're like, Ian, sorry dude, like you're gonna switch between Seiya at DH because Owen is just looking like the guy. Right. Okay, like I could see that happening, but even then, Owen Casey is going to go through a stretch, and then Ian Happ's going to get back in the lineup, and then if they're batting about the same, who's going to get the go ahead? It's gonna be
veteran.
It's gonna be the veteran. So
and I don't think that would trap us from prospects. You don't win with prospects as your main. We see that with the Brewers. Honestly, the Brewers put too many prospects out there. By October, they're toast, or they've been figured out, or they had to make adjustments or whatever. We saw that with PCA last year. He had a rough stretch to start at the plate, figured it out by the end, but you can't rely on these guys for 162 plus the postseason. Yeah. It's very rare when you see a guy go wire to wire and be successful, right? But, I mean, I feel like they've been landlocked by it because it's not that they were going to sign Juan Soto, but Juan Soto is a large improvement over Ian Happ, and we're acting like we're handcuffed because we have Ian Happ on a no-trade clause. When I think if you tell him he's not going to be your left fielder, it might lift pretty quick. I guess that's my counter argument. I don't know what these guys are doing.
I see where you're going with that. I think a better example right now is Seiya Suzuki because he's not going to play right field. Right.
He's not.
So I have conversations with the people online all the time. I don't quite understand that part of the Japanese culture. Like to me, I'm very much just like play better right field. and then you'll get it. But for them, it's a thing of respect. And so I want to respect the culture, but I also am just like, it's the major leagues. Like we gotta put up or get out. Yeah. And so, I mean, but Seiya Suzuki, despite what some fans might say, has been a top 12 hitter in each of the last 2 years.
Correct.
Like, do we really want to get rid of that bat? No. Yeah. And my point there was not that we should get rid of Ian Happ or Seiya Suzuki, but when you do handcuff your team with no trade clauses, and then you have all these outfielders coming up that are supposed to have an opportunity to play, something's got to give.
Yeah. Right.
So we're either going to see Owen Casey go somewhere else, and then we're going to look up in 2 years and be like, well, that sucks.
Right.
It's like the Cam Smith thing.
Right.
I'm not as high on Kevin Alcantara anymore. I think that he's good. I just don't think he's going to get a lot of time with this team. But there's going to be moves made, and you might pick your head up and say, well, had we just been able to give them a comfortable place to get a shot to the majors, we might have seen. Matt Mervis is a good example. Am I saying Matt Mervis should have been given more than 100 plate appearances? Yes. Am I saying he would have been successful with more than 100 plate appearances? No, I'm not. Especially after knowing a lot about guys within the dugout and how they said that he puts a lot of pressure on himself. Maybe he wasn't mentally ready for the situation that he was put into. But that's my point, is why are we putting guys in those kinds of situations that in 2023, he has to come up and he has to perform? Like, he got a tweet from Jeff Passan when he got called up. Like, that's no small thing. Yeah, and he was only like number 21 prospect in our organization. He wasn't even high on the charts.
In Iowa, he's Mash Mervis. I mean, he was.
Yeah, and my point there is like when you put all this pressure on the prospects to be saviors, and they're not even a top 5 prospect in your organization. Yeah. What are we doing? Christopher Morel should have been given the runway to figure out third base in 2022 or 2023, not 2024 when we're in a win now situation. Yeah. It's stuff like that it just feels like the organization is not quite thinking 2-3 years ahead. And I hope, because all accounts of what Craig Counsell comes with is that he does think that way. So hopefully this year now, with Craig Counsell with a year under his belt, seeing the players, seeing how the organization is run, can say, here's what we need to do for long-term success. And hopefully we're seeing that as soon as before Cubs gone. That would be great to see.
Right.
There's
And I mean, even
which we can tie into it. I think he called it football stupid, or talking about the sense of urgency.
Oh, you're talking about the Boog interview. Yeah. Footballification. Yeah, that's the term. Yeah.
And that's what I think we do with these prospects as well. We just they come in and they're not the savior, but baseball is a long process, right?
It is.
So, yeah. Go ahead, Ray.
It's a big thing. But like even when you are like a top 5 prospect in an organization, or even a top 5 prospect in baseball, like the pressure's still on. It's like a lot of these guys have never, like, it's their first cup of coffee, like playing at the highest level. I mean, a guy like Matt Shaw, you want to be able to bring him a special bat, plus bat, can play different spots on the diamond, but the bat's his calling card, which is kind of how it was for Happ and kind of what it was for Schwarber when Schwarber was around. But you want to be able to kind of bring these guys in, let them experience some success, experience some failure, learn from some of the veterans. You don't want to have to throw them to the wolves right away, because it's just not, you want to have the right kind of veterans around. And I mean, Nico Horner's most likely not going to start the year with the team. He's battling through, he's recovering from an injury. I would like to see, and I heard this in your conversation with Lance the other day, but the name Jose Iglesias kept getting brought up, and we are big Jose Iglesias fans. We're also Red Sox fans as well, and very fond memories of him as a prospect. But he is a wizard with the glove. He's a great professional. He's got a good bat. Somebody like that can play every infield position plus and offer that veteran leadership. He was the guy who made the Mets ignite last year when they were kind of down in the dust. They signed him, immediately became a better defensive team.
Well,
a guy like
you're
that could
forgetting
bridge the
about the
gap.
biggest part of all that is that we get Mexican rock concerts after the games too.
Yes, yes, we do. But yeah, guys like that, it's like he can make an impact and he can bridge the gap a little bit. He can coach. You better believe he'll coach up a guy like Matt Shaw in spring training if he's there. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Dig and Deep podcast with Eric Hosmer and Justin Sua, but they had Jose on, and it was just a great interview. Just talking about his experiences, first of all, but just learning the league, learning the American baseball, like coming over from Cuba. But again, he's all about passing on his knowledge. He's all about coaching up people. He's all about elevating others to the next level. So I just think a guy like that would be the perfect bridge the gap guy for a guy like Shaw.
Let's again perspective, right? I think we saw last year, it wasn't talked about a whole lot, but we saw the Craig Counsell impact on young guys.
Yes.
Pete Crow Armstrong, Miguel Amaya, both in their first full, Pete arguably his first full year. What did he get? 123 games, something like that.
Yep.
The struggles that they went through impacted the team majorly in May and June. The Cubs, when it was the bottom third of the lineup, you just knew they weren't scoring.
Right.
And then the power that they had to change the game in July, I don't know that they would, again, speculating, I don't know that they would have turned it on in July like that if David Ross was still there.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not saying that it's likely that they wouldn't. I am saying it's more likely that they did because of Craig Counsell.
Yeah.
So now that you've got that under your belt and you can look at, okay, Matt Shaw, James Triantos, Owen Casey, Cade Horton, you're expecting all of those guys. Ben Brown will come back for ideally his first full season. Porter Hodge will hopefully continue that. And that's another case study as well from 2024, Porter Hodge having the success he did. I think a lot of it has to do with Craig Counsell. And I think this is the year that you see, okay, how much of an impact does he truly have on these youngsters? Because that's what we hate about the Brewers, right? It was just like another guy. And now that he's got those options to have another guy, it's going to be really interesting to see how those guys get acclimated. But I am with you. I still think that the Cubs need a third baseman, a veteran third baseman, some sort of at least beginning of the season impact type of third baseman, so that you can give Shaw a little bit more of a runway. Jose Iglesias would be awesome. I would really have fun with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is what sounds like the cheapest option too, because he was available for a bag of balls last year. They could have swooped him up in a second.
Yep.
And I think there is an opportunity with, I think Matt Shaw at second base would be an easier first try into the infield than just here, go play third base every day. That's
and that's what it's going to be if Nico isn't healthy, right? Yeah. Well, so let me ask you, Brandon, are you in the camp of trade Nico so that Shaw can just have second base, or where are you at?
Brandon loves Nico Horner.
I
do too.
It's really hard to give up that glove, especially for a guy where you're not certain. If you're not going to fill third base, then I think it leaves room for them both to stay. I know he's the one tradable piece because he has no trade clause. He doesn't have a no trade clause. I don't think you get better by getting rid of good players like Nico Horner. And I think he's cheap enough and young enough where you really want to excel off him. I would have a hard time with that.
I'm with you. I until they got Kyle Tucker, the question was, okay, is it going to be Paredes, Horner, or Bellinger that gets traded? It ended up being Paredes and Bellinger. I don't think it makes sense to trade Nico as well. I think at this point, you've got your big bat. You think about this. If Tucker steals 30 bases, PCA is stealing 30 bases, and Nico is stealing 30 bases. How awesome would that be? 3 30-base stolen base guys, even just 25 from Tucker, 3 guys over 25. That would be fun.
I think you have a very versatile infield how it currently stands, because I think even Michael Busch could go over to, and he played a terrific first base.
Terrific.
Especially for never playing really first base at the major league level before. fantastic at first, but I think he is a third baseman by trade. Nico is
I don't think it's going to happen though, because of what Jed Hoyer said. That is our Gold Glove first baseman. Like he straight up said like that he's our first baseman. We think he's going to be a Gold Glover.
Yeah.
And he was pretty rough at third base. But I will say he also looked really rough at first base in spring training last year, and he figured it out. So can he figure it out? Absolutely. I just don't think that they're gonna test that at this point.
No, but it definitely keeps things versatile where you're not locked in.
For
like
sure.
We only have a first baseman. We only have a second. Like, no, they can go around the diamond and they're not regressing. I mean, Dansby Swanson, said as much as it's, again, his bat has been a struggle, his glove is never off. I mean, he played, he should have won the Gold Glove in my opinion, but watching.
And same with Horner.
Yeah.
Horner was the same.
Work every day is just magic.
Yeah. Horner's the deep defensive metrics. He led in most categories. I think
he wasn't even a finalist.
He wasn't even a finalist.
No.
The Rawlings Gold Glove is a joke. It is a joke.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think it's really interesting what they do at third if Nico's not available to begin the year. Yeah, it's tough to trade a guy when he's hurt. So you're right. I don't think he's going to get moved before the year starts.
Yeah.
I think if he does get moved, which I don't want to see personally, but if he does get moved, it'll be at the deadline because they're not competing, not because they need that extra bat. I don't know if he would provide that. I don't know if he's worth that to other teams. That's the other question I would have. Because the teams that are looking at him are like Seattle. Well, what big bat are you getting back from Seattle?
Yeah,
nothing. You don't want anything.
Seattle, you're getting a pitcher. That's the only thing
that's not what they would need at that juncture. So, to me, the market for him doesn't yield what he is essentially to your team. And I think getting a bat like Kyle Tucker was more prudent than anything they would have got for Nico Horner. You're right; it would have been pitching or relievers or whatever that is. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So we're settled at Matt Shaw currently at third base. Is that what we're lingering?
I think second base until Nico comes back, and then I think he's going to be third base platoon, depending on how he's doing with whatever veteran they end up going and getting.
Yeah,
right.
And I would agree, and that's the way to go. I think the biggest, because I was pretty critical, and I know Amaya came on late, but I was pretty critical early in the year with what we were seeing from Miguel Amaya, especially his defensive metrics. That's why I do like seeing a Carson Kelly, because he is a really good defensive catcher.
He's excellent.
If you get with the bat, he's better than Jan Gomes was last year. He was brutal. It's one thing if they would have started the season saying, we're developing, we're getting ready for the next level, we're going to let these guys have a runway, instead of we're competing. That's the words, I think, from the beginning. What I've kind of been mincing with you is just, don't tell me you're competing when you're giving guys like PC. It's fine if that's what we're doing. And that's kind of what last year was. It was developmental year for PCA, for Miguel Amaya, for these guys to get action. But just don't put the we are competing for a pennant attached to it, right?
I think that mindset set this organization back at least 2 years.
Yeah.
Right.
When you ship off Javi, Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, Craig Kimbrell, Jock Peterson, all in one season, that is a rebuild.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now they were. I am not like, if Javi would have stayed, he wouldn't have struggled as much. I think those were all the right moves at the time. I remember it happening, and a friend of mine texted me being like, "What are they doing?" And I'm like, "Well, they were all kind of on the downslope. Like, I'm not so bummed. Like, yeah, emotionally it sucks, but like from a performance standpoint, this seemed like it was going to be a rebuild. Call it that. Like just call it a rebuild, not, hey, we're going to try to compete while we bring in more pieces.
Right.
And that was, I think in hindsight, I kind of wish that the team didn't play as well in the second half of 2022 as they did, because it did feed into that. Oh, look, we can rebuild and compete at the same time. We're 38 and 31 in the second half. And Tom says, let's open the checkbook. You're going to open the checkbook for an 88 loss team? Like, I don't think we're that close. Now, you say, okay, 2023 fans, think about how good Theo was about describing and painting that vision. Fans, stick with us by this year. This is what we're envisioning. If Jed would have just said, hey, I know we had a good second half, but like open that checkbook for me next year, because I want to see what this guy Matt Mervis has to do. I think that, a few of these other guys need to figure some things out. Where is Christopher Morel going to play? I want to try some things out this year with them. I think hindsight's 2020, but it just felt like we're really forcing a competitive team in 2023 that by June was 10 games under 500. And you're like, why did they spend all the money? They miraculously made a comeback and almost made the playoffs. But then again, that just fed into, well, now we got to make the playoffs in 2024. When really, to me, 24 should have been all about building off of what you learned in 2023. And we didn't learn a whole lot in 2023.
No. Bullpen was still the same. It was the same guys. You experienced regression from like Cody Bellinger looked. I mean, Cody Bellinger wasn't bad last year. He was solid, but he was not the guy from the year before. I mean, you had Christopher Morel was not the same player. He struggled mightily aside from a couple big hits. I mean, you're trying to navigate this. And I mean, I give the organization and Jed and all them credit in 23. Like they were 10 games under 500. Like you said, I think they played the Angels coming off the break, and I believe they swept them, and then they kind of was off to the races. They let the organization know, like, hey, let us try to win. Let us try to win some games. And it was they were the best team in baseball for the remainder of June, July, August, and then September. We were actually in Arizona later in the season, and it was like they had lost to the Diamondbacks like 6 games in a row. And I mean, you just kind of knew they were done around there. But like for them to be given the opportunity to succeed in 23, and really, like, we were all pleasantly surprised. I don't think we were really seeing what was happening or appreciating what was happening. But I mean, yeah, then you roll into 24, and it was kind of like, I don't know, it just felt a little bit like lackadaisical. It's like, all right, well, we're there, we're competing. We know there's clear like weaknesses and things that we can address, and try to make a move. Paredes, I mean, I thought was a decent move at the time, ended up not working out, and but ended up being able to be rolled in a deal for a season of Kyle Tucker. So I mean, maybe there's some blessings in disguise, but yeah, you're just trying to like figure it out. What are we trying to do?
I feel like too the last couple of months have been almost like Cubs therapy, if you will. We're almost just like trying to like figure out this mystical web of what's happening, because I wanna root for the right thing, right? I don't want to just be like blindly going in being like, oh yeah, the Cubs should win the World Series. Like, well, I know we're a ways away from that, but like, what am I rooting for, right? What am I spending 162 games of attention span on? We all want to see a winner, but also if it's not destined to be that, okay, what are we watching? What are we looking for? What do we like? I'm okay with it, but I just don't like the perception of we are competing, we are contenders, but obviously not, right?
Well, I think this year it is, especially with all of the things that you've been seeing with the Brewers, the Cardinals. Like, if they don't win the division this year, it is a disappointment.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah. And I think that's the place that should be the standard, right? Especially with the way division forever it's been the Cardinals just have this magic touch, and every player that comes up just, is the next best thing. And it was kind of fun to see, Jordan Walker come up and not be the greatest hitter, and see these relievers come in and start blowing games. And it's like, oh, the Cardinals don't do that. They're smarter than that. But that's just been the mantra forever. And now you're right. Why not the Cubs in this current situation? At least win the division, because the Brewers don't have the cap to do it. They're doing it with smoke and mirrors. I think that 100% that's what's happening. They're taking everyone's scraps and turning them into these stars.
Right. But are they stars, or are they just playing the Brewer brand of baseball and grinding? I mean, they just do all.
I think Jackson Trio is a star. I think
he is. So we have a friend of I have a friend of mine who I went to high school with, who is he's in marketing with the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers, which is I think it's with the restructuring, they're low A, but they're in the old Midwest League, that's your first like big cup of coffee after you get drafted, your first like full season. And he was raving about Churio. He saw him when he was like 18 or 19 years old. He said he looks like a kid, but he does not play like a kid. And it was very cool to see. And it's like, even as a Cubs fan, I mean, being a baseball fan more than that, like you just want to see good players play
Yeah.
well. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, aside from that, like that's what the Brewers play, grinded out baseball. I think Murphy was a really good coach to kind of play that brand of baseball to kind of pay. I mean, he's been all over the college ranks, all over the pro ranks. He's a good lieutenant, or he's a good captain for them. But yeah, they just grind. They're a grinder team, and they always have been. A few big bats here and there, but they grind, and it's good to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if anything that this team needs is just going back to your point, Brandon, just a little bit of fire. And we saw what happened once Justin Steele lit that fire in Milwaukee last year. Things started to take off, and that is what I believe. If we can go over the whole sense of urgency and footballification of the sport, but that's just the biggest.
Don't go down that road.
Yeah, no. That's just the biggest thing to me is like, you'd never know what conversations were being had in the dugouts, in the clubhouse, things like that. But God, that felt really good to see. Like to just see a leader on the team be like, get your shit together, guys. Like, let's go. And for them to respond. And they did the same thing in 2023. Dansby and Rossi, they had that conversation when they were 10 games under 500 and they responded. So it's just like, I think at this point, that's gonna be what has to happen. And Jed might even get in there and have some pep talks because he knows his job is on the line.
Right. You got to believe that a guy like Kyle Tucker, too, who comes from an organization like Houston. We have another friend of ours who works in the Houston organization. He's in sales, but being around that culture the entire time, winning the division, being in the championship series multiple years in a row, just that organization and that expectation, kind of like when Dansby came from Atlanta. Like you just have this expectation to win, and you bring that experience, you bring that fire to this clubhouse. And the Cubs have enough young, hungry guys who they're going to buy into it. So it'll be very. I think. Regardless of Cam Smith, to me, I'm right there with you. Like that's a tough one to part with, but Kyle can change the tone of this organization, and I fully expect him to, and I expect him to do well, and the fans are going to love him.
They need
thing.
that because even though Kyle Hendricks wasn't the pitcher he used to be, we are officially out of the 2016 era World Series, right? So there's nobody left. We need a leader, and you think Dansby's going to be the guy, but you know what? Dansby hit 9th for those Braves, not 4th, not 5th. So to have him come in and expect him to be this, middle of the lineup hitter, it's not really his MO. But he is a leader. He's got a lot to bring. So, but I think Kyle Tucker has that pedigree, and he's also just a really good baseball player. So I think is
top 10, top 10 in the game when he's healthy.
Yeah,
all around.
And we'll see it with Houston. Honestly, if Houston starts to slide here, because their window's closing, right? So not that we want to distract you from other things going on, but baseball in Houston, we've been there before they won the World Series. There's 6,000 people there. So if all of a sudden they start to slide the other direction, it'll be very interesting what happens over there as well. Right. But all right, well, thank you for this bit of Cubs therapy, I guess. This is what we kind of alluded to, but I think it's a good way conversation. To put it. It's again, I feel smarter when I listen to you talk to especially the guests you have on. But that's more we want to be smarter fans. We want to be more.
So it's not that you feel smarter when I talk. It's when my guests talk.
I think you have the right conversations. I think that's just part of it.
Right.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah, but and that's why we want to hear you talk. 'Cause again, it's just a different point of view, but it's also like, hey, this is what we're all feeling, right? We're all frustrated. We all want them to. I think it all comes from we want our favorite team to win, and if they're not winning, why not? And it's not just let's fire everybody and get a new closer and do whatever. There's an intelligent way to go about this, and what are our expectations? And I think you're right. They need to win the Central. I think that it's right there for the taking. So let's have that hope and expectation for sure.
And it's been long enough.
Yes,
right, for sure. I just want to bring up one more thing. So obviously, just again, your podcast is growing, and you're doing a great job, and you're having great conversations, which is what we appreciate more than anything else. you got any interesting things coming down the line? I know you're headed to CubsCon here in a little bit.
Oh, nice.
You have any like cool interviews that are coming up? Obviously, you can keep as much hush hush as
Yeah.
you want. I guess. What do you got? I mean, this
He's
is
got Sammy Sosa lined up at CubsCon.
right,
That's right.
right.
Right,
Well,
right.
I mean, this is a new year. This is going to be your second full year doing this podcast, and I mean, you have got to have some goals for yourself. I know, but I guess what are you looking forward to in 2025 with the podcast, just with your experiences that you're having, interviews you might want to have with people?
Yeah.
Go into that a little bit.
No sophomore slumps. Let's start there. No, we have really big things coming up. I can't say a whole lot right now, but let's just say the team is expanding, which is exciting because I would love to continue to grow this community, because I'll tell you what, it's fun talking Cubs. It's a lot more fun talking Cubs when it's not just me, a microphone, and a camera. So some things will be going on there. Some good interviews coming up for sure. My goal for 25 is to get Kyle Tucker on the channel. That would be really fun. We got Justin Steele, so we got the best pitcher arguably on the team. Now let's get the best hitter on the team. So I'm just having fun. So as long as I keep having fun and people are getting value and feel like they're getting entertainment from the channel, that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
So one thing I listened to local for here at 670 The Score. They have Nico Horner on every week. He would probably be a very fun interview. He's just a real, even on the regular mainstream radio.
I had him.
Okay, well, I need to go listen to that as well.
It was at Wrigley Field. I did a real quick. I won a charity thing auction, and we played.
I remember
cornhole.
seeing that. Yeah,
we played cornhole, and I asked him a little bit about his life, and there was some fan questions. I threw them in there, so it wasn't anything serious like the other ones that you've seen, but we had some fun.
Yeah, I mean that if you got a half hour with him, I'm sure it would be fantastic.
Oh yeah,
yeah. He just
good guy.
He gets it. He understands. But I'm sure Kyle Tucker's same thing. He gets it too. So, very very fun to watch your progress, and we'll continue to pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely, Kyle. Appreciate it, my friend. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. To everybody who ends up watching this, the Setup Man podcast, Kyle Stanley, go follow it. Fun interviews, fun takes, breakdowns. This is the Cubs podcast that you need to be following if you're a nut about the Cubs. So yeah, appreciate it, my friend. Appreciate it so much.
Ryan, Brandon, thank you so much, guys.